Hi, I wanted to show you the Intel CAS caching software and the combination of the CAS caching software and a little bit of Optane and show you what that could do for you. So I have here an older system of mine. This is actually running, this is a Haswell Xeon CPU. And if I pull it up, you can see it's actually an E5 2695 CPU, 2.3 gigahertz. I have 28 cores and 56 logical processors because there's hyperthreading enabled on this. So it's an older machine on here. In the middle, I have the Intel CAS caching software already running, and there's not a lot to this. I can see my cache is on. I have the green right here. My cache drive is P1 here. I know that I had previously set this up. This is a 100 gig Optane drive that I am using for caching. I have it set to write back, and I am caching my S drive. If I look at my drives, I have a few different drives in the system, an S4510 or P4510 NVMe drive. I have a hard drive, and I have a SATA drive. So I'm caching my S SATA drive. That happens to be an S3700 SATA drive on here. So I mentioned I'm running the Intel CAS software. This is actually running Windows Server 2016 on this system, as well as Microsoft SQL 2019 in the background here. So on the left-hand side, I am running a program called HammerDB. It's meant to exercise a database as fast as possible. So I set it up to connect to my database. I actually used HammerDB to create my database, and I created one with 400 warehouses, if you know HammerDB. So that was originally about a 60 or 50 or 60 gig database. You can see it's grown over time the more that I do this. And if I go down now and look at it, my database right now is 200 gig in size. So it's fairly substantial. And then I use HammerDB to go in and exercise it, to read and write to this database as fast as possible. Now I have, how many cores did I say I had? I have 56 logical cores. I actually made 54 virtual users that are reading and writing to this database as fast as they possibly can. And you can see here, HammerDB gives me out an output of performance. So I am over 1 million transactions per minute on this database. I'm 1.2 million transactions per minute, and it oscillates a little bit. On the right-hand side, I wanted to show how the CAS integrates with the Windows Performance Monitor. So this is kind of neat. I can see the green here is my write cache. So my write cache is at like 90% hit rate. That's cumulative I put in here. The red is my read cache. My read cache is 4% cumulative. A lot of the reads are going directly to RAM. And then my active cache size is, I'm actually using about 40 gig of that 100 gig of Optane cache right now. And the other neat thing to see is my processor utilization here. My processor utilization is high 80s to 90%. And it's still growing. The cache is actually still warming up. Remember, my database size was around 200 gigs total. And now, as it's warming up, my TPM is going up in HammerDB. So 1.3 million. I can get the same thing out of command line too. CAS CLI. So okay, so that's my I can look at the performance monitor built in, or I can actually do it all command line if I'd like to. So here are my cache stats, and I can reset these command lines. So I'm using 44 gig of active cache of my 100 gig right now for this, and you can see the same thing, my read hits and my write hits down here. which is pretty neat to see. Now the neat thing I see is, okay, I'm 1.3 million transactions per minute or so with HammerDB. I'm caching the entire S drive. All I'm going to do is, while it's live, I'll say stop caching my S drive, apply, and we'll see what happens. And the first thing I notice is my processor, my CPU utilization tanks immediately. And it's to be expected. Things are happening now behind the scenes. The cache is actually flushing, which it'll take 15 to 30 seconds for that to actually happen. So as this is happening, you can see my performance, my TPM dropped substantially too. My processor utilization is oscillating a little bit over here on the right hand side. We'll give this a second to stabilize. Okay, now we can see that this is fairly stabilized, my performance over here. So as this stabilize a little bit more, you can see I'm reading and writing with HammerDB to my database on my SATA S3700 drive, and you can see my performance in that case is around 500 TPM on HammerDB, transactions per minute. And my processor utilization, if I, this is cache flushes or dropping the CPU in here, but if I draw a line, it's about 60% utilization here. And we should get about 500,000 TPM. I'll give it another sweep or so. We'll pause and pause this and give it another sweep to see what happens. Okay, now you can see it's been almost 2 minutes since we canceled out the stopped caching the S drive, and we're at about 500,000 TPM and at somewhere 50-60% CPU utilization. So we had less than half the performance and 50% versus 90% utilization. That's a big deal. That's less performance, but that's also less CPU utilization. I had this big Xeon processor and I wasn't actually able to use the whole thing. So next thing I'm going to do is go in here and add back my S drive and see what happens. And as soon as I did that, things will start moving around. My blue line on here, which is my active cache size, you see that creeps back all the way back up from 0. So now my cache is warming up. It will take a little while for the cache to really warm up. The green line, which is my cache writes, is moving too. It's going down because I'm getting less write hits as the cache is warming up. And my CPU utilization is starting to climb again. So it should climb above 60%. It'll oscillate a little bit as my cache warms, as things start hitting the cache. Remember, I only have 100 gig of Optane, so it's not a huge amount, and my database is 200 gig now. So I will pause a second and let that stabilize. Okay, and here we are back again, and you can see we're over 1 million TPM once again. It did take about, 2 to 4 minutes to really start warming up these caches, and they're not all the way there yet. I can see if I look at my active cache size on the performance monitor, right now I'm only using about 15 gig of cache. Remember, my database is 200 gig. So it is taking a while to warm that up. And as more and more writes and reads happen, we will see better performance here. I can see my cache write hit rate is about 83. That'll go up to 90. I'll give it a little bit more time, and I should hit up to about 90%. And my processor utilization, I can see, is still not quite stabilized here over 100%, over 90. And we really should start getting about 90 as the cache warms up. I did want to mention this system. I have 128 gig of DDR in here, but I am limiting it to 32 gig for the database. I figured I'm using memory on other areas on this machine, so I have limited my database to 32. If I increase that slightly, this all happens a little bit quicker too. But I thought that was a reasonable compromise. I'm doing file sharing. I'm doing other things on this machine. So now, okay, now we're starting to get there. My processor utilization is in the high 80s, and my TPM is back over 1 million. So that's it. I just wanted to show how easy this was to use CAS software. I can go in, reset my cache statistics, and then dump everything out as well. And you can see I'm using 18 gig of cache. So a little bit of Optane. I have a 100 gig drive in here. I'm using 18 gig of it right now. And I've gotten over double performance. And I know I've kind of stabilized here now that when my rate cache is in that high 90s. Just I happen to know the workload. Thank you for watching.